The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning the military now be ready for an extensive campaign in Gaza. Negotiators from Egypt are trying to help broker an official ceasefire after 2 days of rocket fire and airstrikes earlier this week. But the leader of Hamas says that he will not agree to an immediate ceasefire until after this weekend at least. Palestinians say they're planning a rally, and a massive one, to mark 1 year of weekly protests at the Gaza border. They say they're trying to end the Egyptian-Israeli blockade on Gaza, where about 2 million Palestinians live, many in extreme poverty. The protests have turned violent. The Israelis say Palestinians have launched homemade explosives, and Israeli troops have retaliated with tear gas. So both sides on high alert. Team Fox coverage this hour. Jonathan Hunt reporting. He's live from the Israeli-Gaza border. But let's start with Trey Link. Oh, my goodness. It's hard to say. Trey Yinks, who's reporting live inside Gaza City. Trey.
Shep, ceasefire talks do continue, but so does some of the violence today. We saw a series of balloons with IEDs attached to them actually sent into Israel. The Israeli military responded to one of those launching positions with a drone strike. This as Egyptian negotiators are inside the Gaza Strip right now, meeting with the top officials here, looking to hammer out some of the details of the ceasefire agreement. I did receive a text message earlier tonight from a senior Hamas official who described things as quiet within Gaza, but he said that everyone is looking forward to see how things are going to develop throughout the weekend. As we're talking now, Shep, off in the distance, I can hear some explosions. That is coming from IEDs and grenades that these protesters and rioters along the border are throwing towards Israeli snipers who are lined up to keep those communities along the border safe. Shep?
Well, what's happening on the ground where you are inside Gaza City?
Well, on the ground, you can see people preparing for the potential of major demonstrations, but also major conflict should one erupt. You can also see the scars of war already starting to redevelop here in Gaza. We visited one of the sites that was struck by Israeli air strikes earlier this week. Take a look, Shep. The twisted metal and debris is what's left of a building the Israelis claim Hamas used for intelligence and security purposes. It's one of 3 structures targeted in Israeli airstrikes on Monday after a rocket was fired from Gaza into central Israel. Shep, factions here are calling on the protesters to remain peaceful. But as we have seen in the past with tens of thousands of people at the Israel-Gaza border, it's often difficult to ensure that everyone is not throwing grenades, IEDs, and participating in some violent acts here in Gaza or along the Israel-Gaza border. Shep.
Trey Yinks live inside Gaza City. Our coverage continues now. Our chief correspondent, Jonathan Hunt, he's live right along the Israeli-Gaza border. Hi, Jonathan.
Shep, good evening to you from the Israel-Gaza border. For the 3rd night running, Israeli armored personnel carriers and tanks stand at the ready as, in the Prime Minister's words, the security ring around Gaza is tightened. We should point out that part of this deployment was already planned ahead of the weekend demonstrations. You and Trey were just talking about it, but the tanks and troops have been added to since the rocket attacks were launched from Gaza this week. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the troops here today. He told them that they should prepare for a, quote, broader operation. He also said that if that happens, Israel will enter it, quote, strong and confident. But crucially, Shep, he also said they would only launch that broader operation after all other options have been exhausted. Shep?
Tell us about the politics of all of this.
Well, the simple fact is, Shep, that there is an election here on April 9th. It is a tough fight for Prime Minister Netanyahu, so he wants to project strength. Part of that was his visit to Washington and his meeting with President Trump earlier this week. But here in Israel, he wants to project strength too. So he wants to increase the troop levels. What he does not really want, though, ahead of that election, quite clearly, is the need for a ground invasion and an all-out war, with the inevitable casualties so close to voting taking place here. He has been urged by some of his opponents to quote, open the gates of hell. For the moment, he is keeping those gates locked, but he has not thrown away the keys, Shep.
Jonathan Hunt, live along the border. Thank you.